You are now head of a program that you created, the Humanitarian Futures Programme, that helps organizations anticipate the future risks and helps them think about how to better position themselves to address that. What keeps you going? What motivates you to continue to be innovative, to continue to want to make an impact in this field?
Let me go back. I think it was 2002, 2003, and I was the coordinator in Somalia, and I was supposed to leave Somalia and then move over to the Sudan. And I was, in a sense, this was then going to be my career. I really would have been the Sudan, and then probably I would have had one more assignment in the UN, and then I would have retired as a very proud international civil servant. I loved the UN. I loved what it stood for. I think anybody who says it's a perfect system, if you like, is perhaps slightly delusional, but nevertheless, it is something I am totally devoted to. That said, with that kind of choice in mind, King's College said, well, would you like to come and work with us? And I thought, well, here we have an opportunity to perhaps look at issues in different kinds of ways. And so rather than being, quote unquote, another UN resident coordinator that passes through the Sudan, I would actually perhaps look for something else to try and understand why. And it's interesting, Key, because if you go back to why I actually got involved in the first place, it is this question of why? Why some people, not others? Why 16 but not 10,000? And there's a kind of consistency here, because then I began to wonder about another why. And part of that other why is, it happened throughout my career. Why did I always come to countries where there was really no basis for any prevention or preparedness? Why did I go to Rwanda, and where I thought there was nothing you could tell me about emergency assistance that I didn't know, and then find out 2 weeks later that I knew nothing? Why are we always so unprepared, psychologically, in this sense, emotionally, and in all sorts of other ways when we get involved in someone else's society under the guise of being helpful? So that same curiosity then began to trigger in various other ways. Is all this business just about the quote-unquote hapless South? Where's the North in this? Are we invulnerable? And I began to wonder who actually and how vulnerable are we? And I played around for 2 or 3 years after I left the UN here at King's, and then all of a sudden said, no, there are really sort of more abiding issues than just the bits and pieces that I've been doing. And the abiding issue is this is an increasingly vulnerable planet. We have to start getting away from the idea of the hapless South, the robust and resilient North. We have to understand that the kinds of crises we have to face will be far more extensive, far more dramatic than anything we've ever faced before. That the dynamics of this will change, the dimensions will change, and I didn't see anybody out there talking about this. I didn't see anybody saying, well, what happens if entire systems go down to everything we do? Who becomes vulnerable when the internet no longer functions? When a hacker really does go into satellite databases in which our entire economic system depends, etc. So then you get a whole new dimension of vulnerability. And once again, I saw this issue being discussed in perhaps another fora, the security forum, perhaps the economic forum, perhaps. But where I didn't see it was in that forum where vulnerability should be discussed, namely what we call the humanitarian sector. So I think it is with that in mind that we started up this Humanitarian Futures Program to try and say, I know what you're trying to do now, but what are you doing to prepare for the real potential catastrophes that we all might face? But I think it's even more interesting that, because it's not just the catastrophes we might face, but the extraordinary opportunities that we have to offset them. And who's looking at that? How do we as quote-unquote humanitarian actors dialogue with the scientists? What are we taking away from technological innovations and advances? And so these are the kinds of things that I think then, and increasingly now, I feel that we really have to look at. And this is why the Humanitarian Futures Program, and it's not an institute, it's not an enduring institution that will go on forever, but within a space of time, how many institutions, how many organizations can we infuse with that message? And the message is, how can we help you prepare? How prepared are you to deal with the catastrophes and the opportunities, which on the one hand will create vulnerability, and then on the other hand will remove it? Not based on what you do now, but what you should be doing to prepare for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith, that a rather long answer to what was a very straightforward question.